Hello! Welcome to Path to Staff, the channel where I'm documenting my journey of becoming a staff software engineer at a mid-sized tech company. My name is Steven. I'm currently a level 4 software engineer living in Tokyo, and I'm glad that you're watching. In this video, I'm going to share some research on my current high-level goal and the prerequisite to the one that this channel is about. So currently I'm level 4, and then the next level is level 5 senior engineer, and then after that is level 6, which is staff software engineer. This research consists of looking at ladders as they exist in other organizations and pulling trends and kind of seeing what kind of observations and common themes we can see for general upward mobility in these larger tech organizations. And then this will give us kind of a quick baseline from which we can kind of plan out the things that we want to focus on in order to kind of climb these ranks and ascend the ladder, so to speak. So one thing that's important to understand about ladders is that different companies will kind of do the whole thing differently. So from what a level means to what levels exist, their responsibility kind of encapsulates. All of these things will be different depending on the company that you're at. There are some common, some common ground, especially within the larger tech organizations that we can kind of get observations from. But just as a general rule, the things that I will be looking at for these companies is not necessarily what you need to do at your company to get to senior or staff or any of these upper levels. So just keep that in mind, and the things that I am aiming to do to get myself to staff level, they might be an overshoot for for your staff level or even for your your architect level. It all just depends on the company, depends on you. It's one of those things you can't, this will not fit everyone. This should at least be like a good barometer of like things that you can aim for to elevate your career and get to these higher levels. So one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these ladders at some of these larger, more mature organizations will tend to be split into independent contributor track and then the engineering management track, or just the management track. The difference is not not too complicated. Individual contributors, they are focused on doing work themselves, and they don't have any direct reports. Maybe one or two, or they are taking on mentoring, but they're not, that's not their primary focus in the organization. The management track, by contrast, has you actually managing people, in the sense of like you're kind of like helping them out with their promotions, with getting their success, with unblocking them, with getting them the help that they need. Individual contributors, they kind of just mostly do their own thing, and some, they work within the team, of course. They're not directly responsible for, well, they don't have anyone below them because they don't have direct reports, for the most part. Whereas the management track is more focused on, getting your direct reports, making them successful. Now, like I said before, above the senior level, things kind of start to get a little fuzzy between companies. The architect title in particular seems to be pretty overloaded as kind of the generic level above senior title at some of these companies with fewer levels. Now, a good leveling reference is levels.fyi, which I have linked down below, which allows you to kind of compare multiple companies' different leveling systems. And it also gives you a nice little graphical indicator of like how they stack up in terms of average compensation, which is pretty nice. Now, looking at some of the larger companies, we can see that indeed L5 at Square is pretty close to senior at Uber, Amazon, and Google. Level 6 at Square roughly corresponds to principal engineer at Indeed, but is simply a continuation of the senior level in the other three. Level 7 roughly lines up with staff at Uber and Google, while Indeed prefers technical fellow for their highest level, which starts about here. And Amazon starts using principal at around this level of qualification. A level 8 at Square is roughly comparable to principal at Google and senior principal at Amazon, but only senior staff at Uber. Uber's highest, then, is principal, which roughly compares to distinguished engineer at Amazon and Google. And then Google has pretty much an entire extra rung of the ladder for their highest level, Google Fellow. So that's a lot of numbers and words and titles. It's a mess. But at the same time, it kind of makes sense. You think about Google and Amazon, and generally they have much higher geographic footprints, they have much higher pervasiveness throughout kind of, daily life, and how often they're seen and used. So having a higher top level than the rest for those two is pretty reasonable. The senior level generally aligns across these companies, with Amazon and Google maybe having higher requirements, which makes sense given their size. So to get some more data points beyond just the Square ladder, can we find requirements in JDs for some of these other companies? We can, and we're going to take a look at Google and Amazon for for a more comparative analysis. The basic qualifications for Amazon posting are kind of lame, to be honest. Years of experience in X are a pretty weak filter. I say that, but it is also possible that this is by design to encourage more internal promotions to this level rather than trying to source this level from external applicants. The preferred qualifications, though, are really meaty. Some key things to note here are the broad experience required, so there's things like cloud services, web service APIs, leading roles, cross-team communication, distributed computing, large-scale applications, the full software development lifecycle, starting and finishing projects, deep understanding of fundamentals like algorithms and complexity analysis, big picture thinking of architecture and system design, and the need for experience with humans like mentorship and stakeholder communication. Now let's look at a Google posting. I rather like the more general requirements. One nice side effect of having fewer and more general requirements is that this increases the applicant pool, which is one way to ensure that you do hire the best and brightest, or at least that the best and brightest are applying for your jobs. That aside, we see a lot of the same kind of trends from the Amazon posting. Strong technical fundamentals, experience as a technical leader and owner of products and features, start to finish solutions, big picture thinking, and of course the human aspects of the communication and mentorship and stakeholder communication. Now, finally, let's go back to the Square level 5 description. It's not as focused on the big picture thinking, but it still hits the other boxes pretty well, and even describes a couple of new ones. So there's strong fundamentals and at least one level of expertise, completion of full projects, mentorship and educating others, cross-team performance, and it also specifies things like documentation and finding value that others are unwilling or unaware of. So there's a few trends that we can kind of pull out of these three postings. For one, companies in this space really like engineers who have the fundamentals down solid, who routinely start and finish projects, consider the larger systems at play, and are able to adapt their systems into the larger systems of the organization or of the product, and who are also good at the human aspects of the job, primarily mentorship and cross-team collaboration. So now we have a pretty good idea of what a senior engineer looks like. The next question is kind of identifying the gap. So currently I'm a level 4 software engineer, which is it's the last bastion before reaching senior level. And so for this, we can take a look at some of the job descriptions for each of these companies at the level below senior. So that's level 4 at Square, SWE3 at Google, and SDE2 at Amazon. So for Amazon, it's a bit tricky, as SDE2 doesn't seem to be a common title in their job postings. So instead, we'll just take a look at one of their basic software development engineer postings. As we would expect, the list is much smaller. It's also much more general, noting the fundamentals, contributions to architecture rather than designing or fully owning architecture. Experience with the specific domain is noted as a plus. The communication skills are also still here. So this sounds about right, but let's take a look at Square's. From the start, the scope and impact section of Square's level 4 focuses on productivity, but with guidance. So the breakdown reflects this, mostly focusing on enhancements, solid implementations, the product lifecycle, and code reviews. So two of the biggest parts of the delta between levels 4 and 5 here are the scope of effect and the independence in leadership. So we'll keep this in mind. For now, we're going to look at Google before we kind of continue the trend. So one thing to note from the Google posting is the preferred qualifications include things like Objective-C, Swift, iOS, and mobile UX, which all point pretty strongly towards it being an iOS development position. The minimum qualifications are also pretty bare bones, similar to their other posting. Bachelor's degree, fundamentals, and experience with typical development. There's not too much to go off of here, but worth noting that it's pretty similar to Amazon and not too far off from Square's. Okay, so the trends here are much fewer and also, by that also much easier to spot. So know your basics and, potentially have a little bit about architecture. Have some soft skills, which, includes things like code review, mentorship, knowledge sharing, things like that. And then bonus points for domain experience. And these are all kinds of things that should be achievable just by working in a decent software organization or working really hard in a, in perhaps a less performant software organization for a few years. But you'll probably have to still put in some investment into constant improvement, which might be its own video later. So to summarize, in this video, we've looked at a few different ladders, mostly the ones from Square, Amazon and Google, sorry. And you know, with that, we've also looked at some isolated job descriptions. This should give us a decent idea of the gap that, you know, for example, I have to surmount in order to get to level 5 senior, which is the first step towards getting to level 6, which is staff, which is the point of this channel. In the next video, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the actual gap, and then also discuss some of the things that I'm doing in order to cross that gap. So I hope this was helpful, and if you enjoyed this video, please give this video a like. I would much appreciate. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.